Imagine booking an Airbnb, thinking you found the perfect spot for a quiet getaway. But as soon as you step through the door, you realize something feels off. The house seems to be watching you, the walls whispering secrets in the silence. At night, shadows move where they shouldn't, and the air grows thick with unease. What was supposed to be a peaceful retreat quickly turns into a terrifying nightmare. You'll soon discover this house was never meant to be rented. It's hiding more than just old furniture. It's hiding a truth you might not survive to tell. Don't think you're safe. Before we delve deeper into the horrors that await, make sure you're subscribed and have those notifications turned on. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. And leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Because when the clock strikes midnight, you may not be alone. I never thought a simple getaway would turn into a nightmare. It was supposed to be a peaceful retreat, an escape from the stresses of my daily life. A cabin in the woods, far from the noise of the city, where I could finally unwind. The listing for the Airbnb described the place as quaint, charming, and secluded, just what I needed. The pictures showed an old wooden cabin surrounded by thick trees, bathed in the golden light of sunset. Everything seemed perfect. I arrived in the early afternoon, greeted by the serenity of the forest. The air was fresh, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional bird call. The cabin itself was everything I expected. Simple, with weathered wooden beams and antique furniture that gave it an old-world charm. As I stepped inside, the wood creaked beneath my feet, and I felt an odd chill sweep through the room. It wasn't cold, just off. I shrugged it off as my imagination running wild. After all, I had chosen this cabin for its isolation, its rustic charm. Yet, as I unpacked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The furniture, although beautiful, felt misplaced, too old, too forgotten. A strange smell lingered in the air, like incense, but there was no source. As the day slipped into evening, the silence of the cabin grew oppressive. There were no neighbors, no sounds from the outside world, just the hum of the trees in the wind. And that's when I remembered the stories my grandmother used to tell me, about places like this. About spirits that lingered in forgotten homes and in the hearts of the woods. She would always warn me, some places, my dear, are never meant to be disturbed. The first night, things seemed normal enough. I tried to relax, making dinner and enjoying the quiet. But the longer I stayed, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. The house felt too still, too heavy, as though the very walls were watching me. I told myself it was just my nerves, but then I started to hear it. A creaking noise from the attic, faint but deliberate, like something moving around. I checked the place, assuming it was just an old house settling, but there was nothing there. As the hours passed, the house felt less like a peaceful getaway and more like a place where time didn't matter. The air became thick, almost suffocating, and the silence was deafening. Every little sound seemed magnified. The ticking of the clock, the rustling of the trees outside, the creaking of the floorboards, all of it began to unsettle me. I was beginning to feel like I wasn't alone. The next day, the host arrived to check in on me. He was an older man, Mr. Weaver. His smile was polite, but there was something cold about it. He asked me how I was settling in, and then added in a low voice, "Don't go too far into the woods. Some paths aren't meant to be walked." His words, though polite, had an edge to them, a quiet warning that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Later that day, I ventured outside, trying to push past the strange feeling gnawing at me. But as I walked deeper into the woods, I felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches bending low as if to shield something hidden. The unsettling silence grew louder, and the deeper I walked, the more I felt a pull like something or someone was drawing me in. That night, the house grew colder. The lights flickered, and the walls creaked with an eerie rhythm. As I lay in bed, I heard a whisper, a soft, indistinct sound from downstairs. I lay still, my heart pounding. There it was again, closer this time. A voice, but no words. Just a hum, like a lullaby from a forgotten time. I could no longer ignore the unease crawling beneath my skin. I woke up in the middle of the night to a loud bang from the floor above. My heart raced, and I froze under the covers. My mind scrambled for a logical explanation, but I knew deep down that this wasn't something explainable. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands shaking as I made my way to the stairs. The cabin seemed darker than it should have been, the shadows thicker. I shone the light around, hoping to find a logical reason for the noises. The beams from my flashlight darted across the room, stopping on a small door I hadn't noticed before. hidden behind a stack of old boxes in the corner of the living room. My curiosity won over my fear, and I walked toward it. My hands trembled as I reached for the door handle. It opened with a groan, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into a cold, musty basement. The air down there was thick with something ancient, something lost. I stepped down into the basement, the flashlight flickering as I moved deeper into the damp, stone-walled room. As I reached the bottom, the beam of light caught something, a pile of old belongings, photos, and books. The photos were of people I didn't recognize, but their faces were filled with sorrow, as if they knew something I didn't. As I stepped closer, a small piece of paper fluttered to the ground. It was a note, hastily written in a scrawl. "Once you're in, you're never out." The temperature dropped suddenly, and the flashlight died. I felt a chill race down my spine as something brushed past me. I turned around, but there was nothing there. The whispering returned, louder now, surrounding me. It was no longer just in my head. It was real. I stumbled back, desperate to escape. But when I tried to leave, I realized something terrifying. The door to the basement was gone. I looked around in panic, but the walls had shifted. The entire layout of the house had changed, and I could no longer find the stairs that led up to the main floor. The narrow basement seemed to stretch on forever, and my heart raced with the horrifying realization. I was trapped. I ran, my steps echoing in the darkness, but no matter how far I went, the space seemed to grow, expanding and shifting in impossible ways. The walls closed in on me, the house alive with a malevolent energy that I couldn't escape. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence. That's when I saw him, Mr. Weaver. His figure appeared in the doorway, his eyes dark and empty. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said, his voice distant, as if it were coming from far away. I tried to run past him, but he stepped forward, blocking the way. The air grew thick with dread, and I could feel the weight of the house pressing down on me. "No one ever leaves," he whispered. "Once you're in, you're part of it. You are the house now." I woke up the next morning back in the cabin, or what I thought was the cabin. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and everything seemed normal. But as I stood by the window, I realized something. The house was still watching me. The cycle had started again. The note, the house, it wasn't over, and I was never meant to leave. My partner and I had just moved to the city, and we were looking for a temporary place while we figured out our long-term living situation. We had scrolled through countless listings, but when we stumbled across the apartment, we knew it was perfect. The price was almost too good to be true. Modern minimalist, in the heart of the city, the ad said. It had everything: new appliances, sleek design, and best of all, it was cheap. After a quick back and forth, we booked it, eager to settle in. When we arrived, I immediately felt something was off. The apartment was immaculate, almost sterile. The furniture was modern, clean lines, and sharp corners, but something in the air felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. At first, I chalked it up to the unfamiliarity of the city. But then I noticed it. The apartment had no windows. Not a single one. I scanned the walls, looking for the familiar glass pane, but there was nothing, just blank, solid walls. I turned to my partner, trying to shake off the feeling rising in my chest. "Maybe it's just an industrial building, you know," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "They probably just did some weird design thing." But even as I said it, I couldn't ignore the oppressive silence that hung in the air. The apartment was neat, the lighting soft and warm, but the absence of natural light unnerved me. The stillness pressed in, too thick to ignore. We tried to brush it off. After all, it was just for a few weeks. But every time I glanced at the walls, I felt a growing unease. There was something wrong with the air itself, something suffocating. Still, we unpacked, shrugged it off, and made ourselves comfortable, though I could tell neither of us felt at ease. As the days passed, the apartment felt more and more like a trap. It wasn't the noise, because there was none, but the suffocating stillness. The silence pressed down on us, thick and heavy, like a weight on our chests. The first night we stayed, the walls seemed to hum, a faint, electrical buzzing sound that never stopped. It was subtle at first, easy to ignore, but the longer we stayed, the more pronounced it became. The apartment began to shrink, the space feeling more confined with every passing hour. I tried to ignore it, but every room felt smaller, every door felt further away. We kept checking the time, but it was as if time itself had become elastic. Days melted into one another. It would be 8 p.m., and we'd glance at the clock only to find it had somehow jumped to 10 p.m. without our noticing. Or we'd wake up in the middle of the night, only to find it was still the same hour we had last checked the clock. And then, the buzzing started again. It wasn't just from the walls anymore. It was in the floors, in the air, in the corners of the room. It seemed to come from everywhere, vibrating through the very fabric of the apartment. I could feel it in my teeth, in my skull, the low hum reverberating through me. I would stare at my partner, waiting for him to acknowledge it, but his face was always blank, distracted. I couldn't escape the feeling that we were being watched. I'd turn, and for just a split second, I'd see something out of the corner of my eye. Just a flicker, a shadow moving across the walls. It was as if the apartment was alive, watching, waiting. The closer I got to the walls, the more I felt it, a presence, a heavy weight that I couldn't explain. Time was warping. The silence was suffocating. And something was very, very wrong with this apartment. One evening, the feeling of being trapped became unbearable. We'd been in the apartment for a week now, and things had only gotten worse. The buzzing had become a constant hum, and it was now louder, more pronounced, even in the middle of the night. It was as if the apartment itself was vibrating with energy. Every room was smaller, the ceilings lower, and the air heavier. That night, something compelled me to check the closet. We had never really paid attention to it. It was just a closet. But something was different now. As I opened the door, I noticed the back wall of the closet was off. The shelves, the hanging clothes, they all seemed too neat, too perfect. I moved forward, and my hand brushed against the wall. But it wasn't a wall. It was a door. Hidden behind the shelves, barely noticeable, was a wooden door that blended seamlessly with the wall. It had no handle, just an old-fashioned latch that seemed out of place in such a modern apartment. I called my partner over, and he looked at the door with a mix of curiosity and confusion. "What do you think it is?" I asked, though I already had a feeling in the pit of my stomach. We both hesitated, standing there, staring at the door. The buzzing from the walls intensified, as if urging us to open it. Against every instinct I had, I reached forward, feeling the coolness of the wood beneath my fingers, and pulled the latch. The door creaked open. What lay beyond wasn't just darkness. It was an oppressive, suffocating blackness that seemed to pull at us, drawing us in. We stepped inside, but the air felt wrong, too thick, as though it didn't belong in our world. And then, the door slammed shut behind us. The darkness felt endless. Panic set in immediately. I tried to open the door again, but it wouldn't budge. We were trapped in the dark room, and the silence was deafening. The buzzing had stopped, replaced by an unbearable stillness that seemed to freeze everything around us. I could feel my breath quickening, my heartbeat pounding in my chest, but there was nowhere to go. As we stood there in the dark, my partner grabbed my arm, his voice shaking as he whispered, "What is this place?" I could feel his panic rising, and I couldn't find the words to answer him. The room felt impossibly tight, though I knew it wasn't physically small. It was as if the very air itself was closing in on us, suffocating us. Then I saw it. A flicker of light, too dim to be real, but unmistakable. It moved across the room, and as I blinked, I realized the walls were changing. They shifted in slow, agonizing motions, as if the space itself was warping around us. The buzzing came back, but now it wasn't just in the walls. It was in the floor, the ceiling, in our bodies, vibrating through every bone. We tried to run, but the door was gone. The apartment had disappeared. Its layout, its walls, its very structure had collapsed into something else. There was no exit. There was no way out. That's when it hit us. The apartment wasn't just a place. It was a trap. The lack of windows wasn't an architectural flaw. It was a barrier, a prison. Time was suspended in that place, and we were caught in a cycle, forever trapped in a space where no one left, and no one was ever truly free. The apartment had kept others before us, and now it had us. It seemed like a simple enough booking, a quiet suburban neighborhood, an affordable Airbnb, and a weekend getaway to clear my mind. I had been working non-stop, and this was supposed to be my escape. The listing was perfect, an old but charming house tucked away on a tree-lined street. I had always enjoyed the nostalgia of older homes, the way they had stories embedded in their walls, stories that the modern houses just couldn't hold. When I arrived, everything looked normal. The house had a slight, worn-down charm, but nothing that would raise an alarm. The host wasn't there to greet me, but he'd left a key under the mat as promised, so I let myself in. The interior was neat, though the furniture had that dated, almost eerie quality to it, like no one had lived there for years, but the place was still maintained. It was when I went to explore the upstairs that I met him. a man sitting in the hallway, leaning against the wall. At first, I thought he was another guest, but there was something unsettling about him. He didn't look up when I approached, and when I spoke, he didn't respond immediately. "Excuse me, are you staying here too?" I asked. He slowly turned his head and gave a faint, unsettling smile. "I'm waiting for my turn," he said, his voice distant, almost as if it wasn't fully there. He didn't explain further. There was something wrong with the way he looked at me. His eyes were vacant, like they were staring through me, not at me. The host was nowhere to be found, and the man's strange behavior made the house feel off. But I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just tired. The days following were uneventful, but an underlying tension kept me on edge. The man, who never introduced himself, stayed in the house, though he never seemed to sleep. Each time I passed by the hallway, I would find him sitting in the same spot, staring into nothingness. He didn't move, didn't speak unless I addressed him directly. And then there was the food. I tried to offer him a meal, but he refused, his eyes glazing over as if the concept of eating didn't interest him at all. I had to admit, there was something unnerving about him. The house itself felt heavier as the days passed, stifling, almost oppressive. At night, I would hear the creaks of footsteps, the sound of doors opening, yet when I checked, he was always in the same position, silent and unmoving. I began to feel watched, a constant, uncomfortable sensation that I couldn't shake. One night, I was lying in bed, unable to sleep as the weight of the house pressed in on me. I kept hearing footsteps, slow, deliberate, and heavy, moving up the stairs toward the hallway. I felt the air grow thick, a strange, suffocating pressure building up, making it harder to breathe. The man had never left the house, not once. And the longer I stayed, the more I began to feel like I was being hunted. Each time I turned a corner, I expected to see him standing there watching me. The house seemed to shrink around me, the walls closing in with each passing hour. I felt like a guest in my own skin, trapped in a house that wasn't quite a home. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know who the man was. I approached him as he sat in the same spot, his face as empty and distant as always. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice breaking through the heavy silence. "What do you want?" He slowly looked up at me, his eyes dull, but then a faint recognition flickered. "I'm just like you," he said, his voice low and broken. "I was once a guest here, just like you, but I never left. I was taken." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "Taken? What do you mean?" He stood up slowly, his body unnaturally stiff, as if the act of movement was a struggle. "I was murdered in this house, a long time ago. My spirit is trapped here, forced to relive the moment of my death over and over again. I never checked out. I never left." He paused, his eyes locking onto mine, filled with a deep, sorrowful recognition. "And now, you're part of it. The house will keep you. It won't let you go either. You will be trapped with me, just like the others who came before you." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating me, and my heart began to race as I tried to step back. "No, this can't be happening. I don't believe you," I stammered, but the shaking in my voice betrayed me. But he just smiled again, the smile that wasn't quite right. "You will," he whispered. "You will." I ran. I couldn't think. I just had to get out. I rushed downstairs, grabbing my things, desperately trying to get to the front door. But as I reached for the handle, it wouldn't open. I pulled again, my hands shaking as the door remained shut. I tried every window, every other exit, but the same thing happened. The house had sealed itself off from the outside world. Panic clawed at me as I frantically searched the house. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air growing colder by the second. The footsteps from behind me started again, slow and deliberate, just like before. I turned back to look at the man, but now he was standing at the bottom of the stairs. "You can't leave," he said quietly. "You are one of us now." I ran again, but no matter where I went, the house twisted. The layout changed. I found myself back in the same living room I had started in. The front door was still locked, and I was trapped in an endless loop. The man's face, once haunting and vacant, now seemed to crack a little, revealing something else, something dark. "I was trying to protect you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I wanted to save you from becoming part of the cycle. But it's too late now." I fell to my knees as the house shifted again, the doors vanishing, the windows closing in. The walls began to pulse with life, vibrating with energy that shook me to my core. And then I understood there was no escape. The man had never left because he couldn't. And now neither could I. I was part of the house. Forever. Which of these stories had your heart racing? Was it story 1, story 2, or story 3? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear which one left you the most unsettled. And if you enjoyed this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next terrifying tale. There are more chilling stories coming your way, stories that will keep you up at night, wondering what's out there in the dark. Don't be left in the dark. Stay tuned for the next nightmare that might just be a little too real for comfort.